Israel's military says Iran has fired around 100 drones towards its territory after Israel launched a major attack on Iran overnight. Let's just run through some of the pictures we have here. These are showing Israeli Air Force jets taking off before the attack. Israel says it's targeting the country's nuclear program. And this is the moment a blast hit the capital, Tehran. Iranian media say residential areas have been hit there and across other cities too. Well, Iranian state media says the head of the armed forces, Mohammad Bagheri, and the top commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, Hossein Salami, were killed in the Israeli strikes. 2 senior nuclear scientists were also killed, the former head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization and the president of the Islamic Azad University in Tehran. It follows days of speculation that Israel was planning to launch military action despite US efforts to negotiate a nuclear deal with Tehran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the operation could last several days.
We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program. Last year, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles at Israel. Each of these missiles carries a ton of explosives and threatens the lives of hundreds of people. Soon, those missiles could carry a nuclear payload, threatening the lives not of hundreds, but of millions. Iran is gearing up to produce 10,000 of those ballistic missiles within 3 years. Now just imagine 10,000 tons of TNT landing on a country the size of New Jersey. This is an intolerable threat. It too must be stopped.
Right, let's get a sense of some of the geography here. In the early hours of the morning, Israel announced it launched a major military operation against Iran's nuclear program and senior military commanders. The Israeli military targeted dozens of sites in the country. Iranian state media says parts of Tehran have been hit, and the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, confirmed Iran's main nuclear enrichment site at Natanz was also hit in the Israeli strikes. Well, Tehran now appears to have responded. Israel says Iran launched around 100 drones at its territory. Warning sirens have been heard in major cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I speak now to Shashank Joshi, who's defence editor at The Economist. Thanks for coming on the programme.
Good morning.
We'll get into some of the details very quickly, but just firstly, your headline thoughts about what's happened overnight.
Well, first of all, this is perhaps something of a surprise because it preempts US-Iran nuclear talks that were due for this weekend. So clearly, Israel preferring the element of surprise rather than waiting for those talks to conclude. Secondly, the Americans very, very clearly stating that they were not involved and trying to stay out of this, although they may well be dragged into the aerial defense of Israel from any retaliation. And I think the third point is, this is critical, this is very early days. We are probably only seeing the first waves of what will be a multi-day Israeli campaign. So, for instance, I note with interest, Israel has not yet attacked Iran's most deeply buried nuclear site, which is in a place called Fordow, but I would be surprised if that remains the case in the coming hours and days.
So you mentioned there that the timing took many by surprise. What about the reasoning behind striking like this now?
The Israeli public claim is that Iran was accelerating work towards a nuclear bomb. In my opinion, whilst Iran has conducted some weapons-related activity since 2003, when it shut down its formal weapons program, I don't believe that is the real trigger for this attack. I believe the real trigger is that Israel sees a historic opportunity to act politically at a period where US-Iran talks were looking relatively unsuccessful, in which Iran was looking exceptionally weak, in which its principal ally in the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, had been decimated by Israel last year, and in which Iran's nuclear program, particularly its stockpile of enriched uranium, was expanding dramatically. And all of those factors together, I think, made Israel decide this was the time to take the great risk of attacking those nuclear sites, but also clearly, much more widely than just nuclear sites, also Iran's military leadership.
And just give us an assessment of the words overnight from Benjamin Netanyahu describing, of course, the repeated line that we know about the country facing an existential threat from Iran. What about your assessment of the state of the nuclear program in Iran right now?
Well, Iran has had a nuclear weapons program since the 1980s. And in the 1990s, it authorized a decision to build a number of nuclear bombs and to test them. But in 2003, American intelligence judges that they halted that program, possibly because America was, of course, at that time invading countries on both sides of Iran, Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that program was halted. And in fact, as recently as March, the director of national intelligence in America, Tulsi Gabbard, said that American intelligence judged it was still halted, that Iran had not made a decision to build a bomb. But that doesn't mean that Iran was not dabbling in elements needed for a nuclear bomb, if we can introduce that nuance. It was, for example, looking at things like computer modeling of how a nuclear implosion might work. It was looking at plastic explosives for use in a nuclear device. And so for the Israelis, that was viewed to be an unacceptable progress towards a bomb. I think in general, Iran has not moved significantly closer to a bomb in the last few months. It's accumulated more uranium. But the key change took place in 2018 when Donald Trump pulled out of a nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And at that point onwards, Iran's enrichment capacity and its stockpile of uranium has grown. And that was the real shift after 2018, I would say.
Shashank Joshi, thank you very much for your analysis. That's Shashank Joshi, defence editor at The Economist. Thank you. Let's speak now to our Middle East correspondent, Hugo Bashega, who's in Jerusalem. Hugo, just talk us through what we know and what we don't know right now about what happened overnight.
Yeah, Louis, so we know that the Israelis carried out a large-scale attack on a number of facilities in Iran related to the country's nuclear program. So we're talking about military facilities, nuclear sites, also air defense systems, and crucially, also senior military leaders and also scientists. So I think, the strategy here is very similar to the Israeli strategy in Lebanon against Hezbollah last year, not only to attack and destroy infrastructure, but also to attack the leadership, to destroy, the chain of command. So we're still getting reports about the identities of those who have been killed. State media in Iran has confirmed that at least 2 senior military officers have been killed, have been assassinated as a result of these attacks. Now, the Israeli military said more than 200 planes were used in this operation. More than 300 bombs were dropped at 100 sites. So we've seen, that a number of locations across Iran, at least 6 cities were hit as a result of those attacks that happened in several waves during the morning, including the capital, Tehran. We're still trying to understand the scale of the damage, of the destruction on the ground in Iran. State media is also saying that a residential area of Tehran was hit. It is reporting that civilians were killed as well. But I think the details and the statements coming from the Israeli authorities suggest that, in their view, this has been a very successful operation to really damage and destroy the capabilities, the ability of of these facilities being used by Iran in its nuclear program. I think we're also getting indications from the Israeli authorities that this could be just the beginning of a prolonged offensive. So these attacks are likely to continue in the next few days and even weeks.
And Hugo, what about people there? Because you mentioned the timescale there, expected to continue. What does that mean for people living in Israel?
Yeah, so there is a state of emergency that's been declared in Israel, and the authorities have been warning the population that they are expecting a large response from Iran in terms of drones and missiles being fired. Earlier this morning, the military said more than 100 drones had been fired by the Iranian military, and that reports now in the last few minutes suggest that all drones had been intercepted by the Israeli army. I think, the concern here is that this could be just the beginning of this Iranian response that could involve not only drones but also missiles, an attempt to try to overwhelm the country's air defense systems. Remember, this is a country that has a very sophisticated system of protection. But again, what the authorities are telling the population is that, they should expect a large response from Iran following these attacks. Now, gatherings have been banned in Israel. Schools are closed. The main airport has also cancelled all its flights as the authorities are, making preparations for this possible Iranian response.